Hi, everybody. Welcome to Jot Notes, where we take a deep dive into the lives of authors. Today, I'm solo. I don't have my co-host Jenna with me. I miss her already. But I do have a really awesome guest to bring in. But before we bring in our guest, I wanted to do a quick tribute to one of the industry's true advocates and supporters. We lost one on June 19th, Sir Jim Christina. He passed away, leaving an incredible legacy behind. He was an accomplished author. He was the co-owner of Tuscany Bay Books and the co-host and founder of the Writer's Block on LA Talk Radio. Now, the loss of Jim is a huge void that was felt by the entire writing community. He will be missed by the authors that he interviewed and whose works he advocated for, and the incredible relationships that he built with media and publicists. And also, and of course, the most important, the loved ones, which include his wife, Jerry Christina, and his business partner, Richard. Jim, you are going to be a legacy, you are a legacy that will live on and you will not be forgotten. So huge tribute to him and an honor on our memorandum. But now that we got that out of the way and we tributed him, I want to bring in our guest. We have V.S. Holmes here, who is a critically acclaimed science fiction author. Now, the fourth book in the Star Edge series has won the prestigious Silver Global Book Award, and we are privileged and honored to have V.S. here with us today. And so let me bring them in. Sorry, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I'm stoked to have you here. We talked a little while ago. I mean, I feel like it was a couple years ago, but I'm pretty sure that's just the COVID reminiscence.
A year, a decade.
Every year, a decade. It sounds the same, feels the same. And I want to dive kind of into your new book. But before we do that, and kind of what I like to do is dive into how we got to here and what we got or what we started with. So I want to talk to you about how your writing career began, because I know you're into other things, but where did the writing start for you?
I mean, I think every author has that sort of easy out of I've always been writing to some extent, and I definitely have always been drawn to stories and drawn to storytelling. I grew up. I'm an only child, so I grew up pretty isolated. We live in a really rural area, so I grew up in the woods. I didn't make a lot of friends very easily either. So a lot of my friends were the stories I was telling myself, and I'd go out to the woods and spend hours out there. Back when parents did that, and I would just live in these other worlds in my head, and then I'd go to sleep and I'd still be thinking about all these ideas. And when I got older, I started to actually put those stories down on paper. And both my parents are avid readers. My mom's more into nonfiction and things like that, and she was also an editor. And then my dad loved science fiction and fantasy, and those were the stories that I was also drawn to the most, partially because, at least at the time, the books that I was exposed to, those were the only books where I was seeing people who I felt like I could see myself in those characters. So that's really when I got my start, when I was a young kid, and then I didn't really start taking it seriously, doing it professionally, until college, because I figured, why not add one more giant writing project to an already full course load. But that's sort of when I started to switch over to treating it more like a career.
I you know what, I like that, because you're right. Every author that we speak to, we ask that question to, and it comes to well, I always knew I was going to be a writer, but then here was kind of my story on taking it seriously. And you have self-published your books, right?
Yep.
So how has that? I have self-published my books as well, and that journey has been sometimes a tough pill to swallow. Sometimes my ego is a lot bigger than most of the time. My ego is a lot bigger than my paycheck.
It's a good way to put it.
Right. So how has your publishing journey been over the years with the the multiple books that you put out there?
Harrowing, right? It's a harrowing journey. honestly, when I first started writing, I was querying Smoke and Rain, but it was under a different title at the time. I don't actually even remember what my working title was. And I was getting bites. I got a couple full requests even, and it was tough to query, but I don't think it was nearly as tough as it is these days. Especially like in the past few months, things have really gone a little haywire. And so it wasn't really, I was getting those bites, but for me, I kept feeling like I had to change my story, change certain pieces of it to make it punchier, to get the voice down, to all the different voices and feedback that you hear when you are online as an author. And I also, this was at least a decade ago, I also was writing queer characters. Not quite as on page in Smoke and Rain, but I knew where I wanted to go with my stories. And especially at the time, I was not seeing many authors writing those things, getting agents, getting published, especially getting picked up by the big five. And thankfully that's changed. So for me, it was more of a choice between having that big paycheck to go with the big ego, or at least a slightly bigger paycheck, I suppose, and wanting to tell the stories that were most important and really the reason why I was writing in the first place. And because it was that choice, for me, I haven't really looked back, and I've always kind of when I've lost my way, when I've gotten a little downtrodden, or I see all those posts like, oh, I got signed, oh, I got a 6-figure deal, and I'm so happy for those people, but there's that little twinge that I think is human. And, yeah, yeah, maybe a bigger twinge sometimes, but when I see that, I remind myself like I'm doing things at my pace and I'm doing things my way, and I think that has been the biggest piece of my indie publishing journey. And honestly, I found such a great team. I found so many fantastic authors and, fantastic people like yourself that I get to talk to. And I don't know if I would have found those same people or those same communities without going indie, because you kind of have to do it all yourself. So.
Yeah. Oh, you're totally right. You're like a one-person show, right? You're having to do it all. But I do like that you mentioned that you were writing queer stories and queer characters, and it wasn't a big thing at that time. And luckily now the market is changing, and it resonated with me for the reason that I very much write for something that sticks with me, that is in my heart, that is in my home, and it helps me personally. It helps me develop personally, and really take a look at my life and figure out how I want to get better. Is that something that you have found over the years of writing, that when you are writing these characters and writing these stories that weren't typically in the market a short time ago, that it's not only helped, let's say, take the blinders off the general public, but also helped you find your sense of being and find your sense of purpose?
For sure. I think, superficially, like obviously getting to write my own stories is awesome. And it's really great, especially when some of these stories are, and especially as an indie author, these stories are getting acclaim. That is just huge for me. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's sort of another aspect, which I think you were sort of hinting at there, where as I'm working through my characters' problems, which are, a little bit more bombastic than my own, but as I'm working through those problems with them, I am able to kind of work through some of my own. And actually, sometimes I would actually say almost always, my biggest writer's blocks are when I am not ready or I don't have the tools to face a certain issue that my character is having. Yep. My fourth book, Heretics, I had to completely rewrite that one. Like ground up, worst book I've ever written, completely rewrite. Which, I thought I'd done that before, but no.
You hit rock bottom, and then you're like, oh, actually, no, that was That was
Yep.
not rock bottom. That was just really
Exactly.
low. I'm pretty sure I hit rock bottom right now.
Right, and I guess it just keeps getting deeper, right? But for me, part of the reason, obviously it was also written during the pandemic. It was written in the wake of my father's death, so there were some other things going on. But part of it was the emotions that my character Nell was feeling, this isolation and this betrayal, and being surrounded by people and involved in something that she just didn't feel included in or didn't feel like she had a place in. Those were things that I was feeling, and I wasn't able to see my way out of it. And so I wasn't really able to see Nell's way out of it. And through trying to untangle a lot of those plot knots, once I realized, like, oh crap, I can't publish this. This is a trash fire. That's when I started to realize, like, okay, it's coming from somewhere. So
Right.
why don't you like work on your own crap, and then maybe Nell can work on her stuff. And
Yeah.
that was definitely a huge piece for me, as I was able to work through my stuff, or realized I had to work through some stuff through Nell. So.
It's great when those self-reflecting mirrors pop up on the Word document in front of you, and you're like, I'm not ready for this at all.
It's like that meme, right? I'm in this picture and I don't like it.
Exactly, and and for the sake of Pride Month, it's and for just somebody who I support the community. I'm not part of the community, but I'm there in spirit. But just working on myself consistently. I love that you have been open to discuss this, and open to be an advocate for the community, and open to say, hey, you know what? I had to work on my things, and therefore when I work on my stuff, my characters tend to blossom and my stories tend to blossom as well. So you're not only an advocate for yourself, but you're an advocate for the community, and the stories are now advocates for the community. So I'm like rooting you on 150%.
We need all the help we can get these days.
Right, and the world is a tough place, and critical and ridiculous, and it's not as simple as black and white. There is like a whole lot of shades of gray in between there, and we all just need to learn to just be kinder to one another. And I think the more we talk about it, the easier it's going to get, and the less touchy people will be. You're allowed to be all feely, but maybe not a little touchy, right? And I like when we can openly talk about it, and or even talk about politics, or talk about religion, or talk, all of that, without it having to turn into an argument.
Yes.
And when authors like you go out there and tell those stories, you're bridging that gap of having an open, honest, kind discussion versus having an angry fight and just disagreeing and walking away very angry.
Yeah, I think having those conversations is so key. I was talking recently on a previous interview. I can't recall which one, but we were talking about people being awkward around gender and sexuality conversation, like well-meaning, totally like normal, nice people just being awkward, and how that awkwardness feels so insurmountable. And I would take a genuine, authentic, super awkward, super poorly phrased question,
Yep.
over just like, I'm gonna just shut down and ignore it.
Yeah.
Because like I'm awkward all the time. Like I don't think there's ever a minute that I'm not awkward. So like already there.
Yeah.
And we can usually tell when it is just a genuine, like, hey, I know nothing, but like I'm trying. We can almost always tell when that is where it's coming from. And I just love those, like, that vulnerability that it takes to say, like, I don't know something, but I'm trying to be here for you. And I just think the more we talk about it, the more people will feel comfortable broaching that awkwardness.
Oh, for sure. And you said it exactly right. And I look at it as, if I'm awkward asking about it, not necessarily discussing, just not knowing how to phrase something properly, or whatnot, then the awkwardness that I feel is minuscule and very minute compared to the awkwardness you have had to feel to actually live it, go through it, and figure out what path you're meant to take and
Mhm.
who you are on the inside and out. And I mean, everybody takes a self path, and that is an
Right.
awkward journey regardless. But hey, you've had to go through a little bit more hoops than the average. And I'm like, okay, if I can just be open or talk about this, then you're bridging that gap. You're making it less awkward for the next time you have that conversation,
Mhm.
and having an understanding that everybody is different, that they are like, I like that gray version instead of black and white. It's not
Mhm.
just black and white. There's a whole lot of gender and sexuality in on the spectrum, and the more you do talk about it, the more you're going to understand it, versus just the shutdown. Hey, I disagree with you, so you're wrong and I'm right.
Right.
Um, I don't believe that. I don't even believe that if my husband and I disagree. I'm like, hey, you have a different version of that in your mind. He comes from
Mhm.
like the streets of Africa, and I come from white suburbia Canada. Of course, we're going to have different views and perspectives
Mhm.
on things, and it's okay to not understand each other. But as long as we can actually have a sit down, civil conversation and learn, then the next time you kind of broach that topic, it's not so awkward or not so awkward. I don't know
Yeah.
what other word to use,
Mhm.
but or like
Well, like
angry, or
abrasive or yeah. Mhm.
yeah, abrasive. Yeah, it gets easier with time.
Mhm.
And I mean, love is all kinds of colors.
Yeah.
And really, the sooner we all understand that, I think the better we're off. We're better off. So,
Mhm.
I do want to go a little bit off top of writing before we come back to your new book, simply because I absolutely love what you do during the week. So I want to about it.
I mean, so do
Um,
I, so
right? Like, okay, so you're an archaeologist
I
and you
am.
dig up cool things. So can you tell
Sometimes.
us? Sometimes you're like, sometimes I dig up things and that I cannot unsee, or I
Mhm.
just play in the dirt for months on end and find nothing.
Yes.
um,
Mostly that.
mostly I play in mud. I have a niece that loves playing in mud, so maybe she'll join your team one day. So what are some projects that you were working on? You recently got a promotion and you're heading up some projects. So tell us a little bit about what you're digging up these days.
Yeah, so yeah, I have started running projects full time, which is really fun and really challenging. And I had sort of a funny moment earlier this year because I've run projects before for various other companies, but this was like full time, like actual job security, which is something that a lot of archaeologists don't really have, unless if you're in academia, and even then, that's kind of a whole other uncertainty ball game. But yeah, so I've been really enjoying that, and I did have a sort of funny moment earlier when I was thinking about one of the first scenes that I wrote in Travelers when Nell is cleaning up after working, and she's thinking like, oh my god, I have my own site, I have my own like crew, and like okay, they're super green, but like I have my own crew and I'm running this project, and like someone pinch me, I'm dreaming because this is what I always wanted. And I had that sort of exact same thought process earlier this year, and I got to think like, oh, like I'm following in her footsteps. I mean, we'll see if I end up in space. I don't know, but so yeah, that's been really fun, and I've been mostly working on endless power lines, which is sort of where we live now. But it is neat. I have always been drawn to power lines and weird liminal spaces where people have made an impact, but they aren't necessarily living. It's not a permanent place for people to exist because things that fall through the cracks of society collect there. Like you were saying, like dig up some weird stuff that we can't ever unsee. The stuff we find or see is pretty wild and very inspiring. A lot of my weird stories, like probably the weirdest ones that wind up in Nell's books, the weirdest anecdotes are probably the real ones, frankly. So yeah, that's been great, and I've been working with a really wonderful crew. Most of us started working together last year, and that was the first time that I was actually out at work. You know, I've talked about, you know, being bi, but I'm married to a cis man, so it looks a certain way. And this was the first time that I was actually open about being non-binary, and it was terrifying, but really eye-opening because the entire crew was just like, okay, like we're gonna mess up a few times, but all right. And within like a month and a half, they all just got it. Like no hiccups, no questions asked, just like totally normal, totally fine, totally welcoming. And that really opened my eyes to some of the people who are bigger parts of my life who found it difficult to do so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, which is, you know, sort of bittersweet, but it's also just wonderful to be able to go to work and be myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been out in the writing community for years and years, but you know, that's behind the safety of a screen, and
right
work is a little different. Yep. So yeah, it's sort of great on a couple different levels. Power lines are always a little bit political because it's, you know, big progress coming through people's backyards, and then also both of those things impacting cultural history. And I like the challenge. I like the problem solving. I like having to figure out, you know, okay, where are we going next? We can't go there because that's a bunch of farm fields, and that farmer was sure not happy to see us yesterday. So, you know, all of the logistical planning, I find really fascinating. So that's all I like writing.
Right, exactly. Lots of ups and downs, and you know, rises and falls, and challenges that come out. And I love that work has been open, but I like the fact that you said, hey, like it's kind of opened up my eyes to say, if people that I work with have had no problem or qualms or issues with accepting me for me, then those people that are my family or my close friends shouldn't be having those types of qualms and issues. Or maybe it's just it's that light bulb. My brother, when he came out, he was very hesitant about our family accepting who he was, even though all of us knew a lot longer than like we knew when he was little. And I think he tried to just not be who he was meant to be for a long time, which came with a lot of challenges and struggles. And when he finally came out, we were like, okay, wonderful. Like you can be who you're going to be, and we're going to love you. And he was so taken aback that like we weren't angry or whatever. And it kind of just opened up my mind, going like, wow, there's a lot on the outside that you have to deal with, but what you're dealing with on the inside is multiplied like a million times over, because you're not feeling any type of way that society is telling you to feel, which is now this internal confliction and this internal war that you're consistently battling with yourself. And I've had to do that for a bit, like other little itty bitty reasons over the years, and that was difficult enough, but to battle it, you know, most of your teenage and adult life is a big challenge. So the fact that, you know, you've come out, people are accepting you, you're succeeding professionally, your role or your world as an author is success. When you said, we were talking before we went live, you're like, I keep having to tell myself that I deserve to be where I am right now.
Exactly.
And that is true. Like that it's seeping or soaking in that sweet, not revenge, but just, I got to where I've been striving to get to, and I do deserve to be here. And the haters will hate, and the people that are not going to understand are not going to understand, and that's okay. But I am where I am, and it's all due to hard work, perseverance, and a lot of self-reflection that's turned into self-love. So
yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting that you said self-reflection, because I think part of what makes some people who are maybe not as marginalized, so reactive and so angry is, it and I'm happy for them on one hand because they haven't been forced to consider who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe like you said on smaller scales, but like the things that society considers like the core of who we are, of our personalities. A lot of people haven't been forced to consider like, well, you better be sure because it's going to make things harder. It's going to burn some bridges. Um, you haven't thought about that, and I think a lot more people maybe should, because I think they would maybe confront some fears that they don't deserve the things that they've worked for, that they maybe have a lot of struggles inside that they just haven't even looked at. And it might not be as complex as gender or sexuality or anything like that. But I do think a lot of that reactivity comes from those ideas of like, well, I haven't considered myself as much as you have. And it's like, well, maybe you should.
Yeah. I don't know if that's something you should be bragging about. I call
I
it
have no insight
blissful,
whatsoever.
right, exactly. I call it blissful naivety, like just to live in a world where your actions, your thoughts have never been questioned
Right.
and challenged. And as much as people might think that would be like the place to live in, I have come to terms in my early 30s that the more I have been challenged earlier on in life, and continuously, I will be challenged consistently, but it gives me that opportunity to self-reflect, or to literally, like I say, like to sit in my own poo. Like it's not a nice feeling to sit in your own caca. So, but what comes out of it, what can come out of it, makes you a better person. And when you become a better person and evolve, then the blessings come to a point where you are right now. You're like, well, I have health benefits, I have job
Yeah.
security, we are in a good place in our relationship, romantically, personally, like everything is bliss.
Yeah.
But it's not like you got like an 8-figure bank account and you're driving your Rolls Royce around and flying private jets to islands, but you have this feeling of bliss when the simple needs are met. And I think that is so important to take away, to say like, that's actually all you need in life. And when you do have that feeling of bliss for the simple needs, then maybe that 7-8-figure bank account is going to be one step closer for the next chapter. You never know, or maybe the next life, who knows, whatever you want to believe.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's interesting what you say about how the more you're challenged early on, and how beneficial that is, because I think a lot of us start to equate like, oh, if my thoughts are challenged, or my opinion on maybe something that's not super consequential, or this thing that I did, just because you did those things and those are being critiqued doesn't mean that like you as a human are being critiqued. And I think when you learn that early on, you can start to realize like, oh, I can change my opinion. Like I not everyone wears the same fashion that they wore in high school. I mean, some of us do, but not everyone does. So why wouldn't you like try on some opinions and try on some thoughts as well, and also maybe put some in the donation bin.
Right, get rid of some. I simply I put it as, hey, if you only grew up eating scrambled eggs, how do you know if you like basted, fried, omelets, etc.? Like,
Yep.
you gotta figure out what kind of eggs you like by trying them all. Yeah, I completely resonate with that and agree with you. So now, before we end, I really want to talk about what we came on here for, is to talk about your newest release, and expanding this series that you've put out, and it's a space opera, right?
It's space. It's sort of hard sci-fi. I don't go maybe quite into the typical sciences that a lot of hard sci-fis, like classic hard sci-fis, have. I'm a bit more into the hard part of the brain, and the archaeology aspects, of course, and things like that. So I guess it's like sort of hard sci-fi, and there's a little bit of a space opera um, feel to it as well. But yeah, so fourth book is Heretics. And it was my pandemic book. This is the one that was terrible that I had to rewrite. But yes, it has been rewritten. And it's actually getting the most acclaim of any of my Nell Bentley books, which shows that the rewriting was worth it. And yeah, so I guess for those who aren't super familiar with my Nell Bentley books, it follows foul-mouthed, foul-tempered Dr. Nell Bentley, and her pristine archaeological site in Chile is suddenly becomes the center of this intergalactic feud. And she's a super skeptic, and so she's thrown into this world of high tech and higher stakes, and hates every minute of it, except that woman on the other side is sure as hot. So I guess we're gonna go for it. She's a little single-minded, Nell is. So this is the fourth book. There's going to be a total of 6, and this one was definitely a deep dive into Nell's psyche. In the second book, I did that a little bit with her grief, her whole grieving process. But this one is where she actually starts to dig into herself and to her feelings of isolation and inadequacy, and also just sort of what it means to be human. She sort of had ideas of like very firm ideas as a anthropologist, as a PhD. She had very firm ideas of what it meant to be human and how humans interact. And she has to sort of rethink all of those and decide where her loyalties lie. And there are super fast trains. There are, of course, explosions. There is a killer sound wave. Ooh. And also some like kind of fun, kind of gross body modification tech that goes wrong. So
that sounds very, very, very exciting. And this is book number 4 out of 6, you said. Mm-hmm. So for our watchers or viewers and listeners, mm-hmm. where could they find all 4 of them that are available now?
Sure. So if you are a Kindle person, they are available on Kindle Unlimited as ebooks. And then you can order a paperback from myself if you want it signed, or just from your local indie bookstore. They're available through order with Ingram. So most bookstores have it. And Amazon as well, if you want the convenience there. So you can grab those. But if you aren't really sure if snarky, foul-mouthed archaeologist is right for you, you can go to my website and download a free short story that is sort of the prequel / it takes place sort of simultaneously as the first book, but it is through Nell's love interest Lynn's point of view. You kind of get to see how the not so alien, not so human side works.
Oh, I like that. Give everybody a little taste tester, mm-hmm. an aperitif before they dive in for the main course. And it's finding a good series is like finding a series on Netflix that doesn't have 5 episodes, that has like a few seasons, so you can binge watch. After 5 episodes, you're like, oh, that was so intense, but now it's over. What am I going to do? And then you start searching for like 17 hours to find something new. And I am the same way when it comes to reading.
that like TV or reading hangover is quite a kicker.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely what we got here. So pick up your copy of V.S. Holmes's 4th and best book, and we can't wait to see what comes next. But thank you so much, really, for joining us today. I had a fantastic time with you. The time flew by really quickly, as it always does, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next, and all the best. And a big thank you to our viewers and our listeners, and last but not least, a big thank you to our sponsor, Mickey Mickelson, with Creative Edge Publicity. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're coming at us from. Have a good one. Bye-bye.